A lot of times, we do tend to focus on, when we think about medical school, for example, something like that, I think when we think about experiences, it's easy for your brain to go to, oh yeah, research experience, they're going to want to know about that, or shadowing experience, I know that's important, they're going to want to know about that. You may not think about work experiences or volunteer experiences quite the same way. So what I wanted to do by giving you that overview is sort of say, look, each of these experiences has value. Okay, so that's the first thing, and I want to make sure that we recognize that each of those experiences have value and that we don't dismiss things that we have, like work experiences, because, and we're going to talk about that extensively today, I don't want you to dismiss those. All right, that being said, I think it's also very, very difficult. You guys are all very busy people. We have a room full of high achievers here, and high achievement takes time and effort. And so then, and that's what I'm saying, your time is an incredibly valuable resource, and how you choose to allot that free time, that valuable free time that you have, is kind of really interesting, and it's a real choice. One of the things, so that being said, I think that if you submit an application and you don't have a lot of volunteer work in there, but you have research, you have other areas, people are going to go, wow, you have all this academic stuff that you've been able to do, and you did research, and and so yeah, volunteer work, oh, it's too bad, but I understand why you didn't do that. People understand that. Okay, so I think that I wouldn't, I'm not encouraging any of you to wig out if there happens to be a type of experience that you don't have. Don't wig out. That being said, if you have no shadowing experience, wig out. That, of the 4 experiences, is the experience, I think, though, although it's not required, as I said before, is an expectation. And the critical nature of shadowing is that people are going to want to know, when you are applying for a program in the health professions, what you understand about that profession. All right? And shadowing is like the one thing that people recognize as like, yes, that's an experience where you actually get to observe what happens. Like, what is that? It's not theoretical. It's not one of these kind of grand and glorious essays. It is actually, you're in the room, you're experiencing, you hear all the sounds, you smell all the smells. You are able to take in everything that is, and understand this is an environment that you are choosing to put yourself in the future. So that's why shadowing per se is a critical experience. Okay? Other questions? All right, so let's talk a little bit about experiences, because I think that one of the things that is challenging is as a student, when you are applying to become part of a different institution, a different program, the really hard thing to sort of really wrap your head around is, in that application process, what are people actually looking for? What is it? Why do we have to go through this application process? Clearly you know that academics and the ability to successfully complete a program is important. And as we kind of reviewed, it accounts for 50% of the overall consideration if you're applying to medical school, but only 50%. So then the other half is all that other stuff. And it's all that other stuff that's a little bit tricky to figure out exactly. So we know that there are certain experiences that we have to have. But beyond that, and more critical than that, is we need to sort of understand what we've learned about ourselves. What we've learned about ourselves, we need to understand the skills that we've acquired while we've been doing all of these experiences. Okay? Then, so that gives us an understanding of who we are and what we're capable of doing. We take that information and now we go back to the profession that we're interested in. I'm interested in being a doctor. I have this set of skills. I know this about myself. I know what makes me happy. I know the kinds of experience I know that I've really, really enjoyed and really valued. How does that translate into being a doctor? What about this is going to be significant if I think about what it takes to be a doctor. All right? Does that make sense? So I'm seeing the kind of vague looks on faces that I frequently see in students when I talk about this, because it sort of makes sense, but it sort of doesn't make sense. All right? So let's try and tear that down a little bit. Let's try and break it into like little building blocks. And I hope that as we move through this, and I give you some sort of tangible examples of things like this, that it'll begin to make more sense. I'm not going to try and pull information out of you. So I'm going to have my back to you because I'm going to be writing on the board. So if you guys at any point have any comments or questions, just shout them out so that I know that you're trying to get my attention. And then the other thing is I'm going to start, and please, if there's anything along the way that you want to kind of toss out there, contribute to the conversation, please feel free to do that. So one of the things that I asked you about the other day is, what do you think, when you think about a good doctor, when you think about an experience that you've had with a healthcare provider that was a really good experience like that, either one that you've personally had or one that you've observed, it's you know what that's like. So you know when you've seen a really good interaction. But sometimes, we need to move beyond that. The same way that the courts, there was that famous line about pornography that came out of the courts. It's hard to explain exactly what it is, but I know it when I see it, right? So I don't want to use that kind of, judicial definition of pornography. We're not going to do that about what is a good, interaction for it. What is that? We need to sort of understand it more, what that is. Okay? It has lots and lots and lots of different component parts, but one of the things that I think is really important, and really what it starts with, is communication. Okay, and we talked a little bit the other day about what that means to communicate. So in other words, you take an idea, you have information, it comes out of your mouth. That's a challenge because it can come out of your mouth in a variety of different ways. And I can say things to you which you will totally not understand because I can use a certain technical vocabulary that you may not be familiar with. And then I say that to you and you sit there and nothing makes any sense. It's kind of like reading a foreign language. It's like, okay, I see the words, I understand all the letters, and I have no idea what that means. All right? But we also know that we can translate foreign languages. Right? So we know what that's like. And some of us who are not primary English speakers do that all the time. So in other words, we may be thinking in one language and literally have to translate into another language. Joe, I'm gonna kind of look at you when I say so, I'm sitting there going, here's my example of that, all right? So, but you understand what I mean, and it's exhausting. To sort of find yourself in an environment where you have to where you're thinking in one language and then having to translate into another language. That's really tiring. It's a lot of work and it's constant, right? Then imagine, let's take Korean, and now we're going to learn technical language in Korean. But now, so we may understand certain terms in Korean. Now we've got to figure out what those technical terms are in English. Okay? That's one set of stuff. But now you've got the technical vocabulary in English, and now as a healthcare provider though, and me, your patient with my 6th grade education sitting across from you, now I'm going to ask you to translate again. And that is taking that technical English and translating it into English that me as a 6th grade educated individual can understand. Okay, so those are the levels of complexity that we can get into. Now, granted, I don't have to start by thinking of things in Korean, so my job is 30% easier than your job. Okay, I've eliminated one level of translation, but to sit there and take sort of a complex term and think about how to convey that in simple English is a challenge. Okay, now, have any of you had any experience like that? Would you like to share that?
Oh,
Sarah?
I'm getting a dual degree in sign language and biochem. So Sign language, a lot of the times, especially in class, the professor will be deaf. So you have to think what they're saying, what they're signing in English and understand it in English. Or if they're hearing, sometimes they ask you to sign while you talk. So you have to kind of like do both at the same time. So I understand.
Okay, so really interesting. And now, since you're here, I want to ask you a question. Can you help me with this?
Yeah, so translator, they're very similar. And to be an interpreter, you have to have like very much of a degree and a certification. They essentially do the same things on like a low level. An interpreter sometimes like they'll convey like a message. Translator is literally just like the word to word.
Okay, so they're similar, but they're definitely not the same.
Yeah.
And I have crossed swords with way too many interpreters who I've unknowingly referred to and inadvertently referred to as translators to sort of know the difference. So translation is literally taking a word and turning it into exactly that word in another language. Okay? Where interpretation is really a lot more of what we have to do when we're healthcare providers. In other words, it's kind of that idea of taking the information and then sort of saying, how do we twist this? How do we turn it into something where we can convey the meaning of that to someone that may not have exactly that fluency, that may not understand the exact words? So that's the difference between a translator and an interpreter. If you have an interpreter, that's a person that has the ability to understand what you're saying and turn it into language that is going to, mean something to the person that they're interpreting for. All right? So yeah, so they're really similar, but they're different. Okay, so it's a very different it's a different skill. All right, but it's interesting that you've had that experience literally with sign language. That's really, really interesting. Anybody else had any challenge with taking technical information and turning it into something that's understandable to someone that may not have that vocabulary? Yes.
I have some family over from overseas, and she's my aunt, and she speaks Arabic, but it's like the kind of Arabic that I didn't grow up learning, because I grew up learning like the slang Arabic. And her kids, they speak the real, like the actually proficient, good Arabic, and I can never talk to them, and I can never communicate what I want to say to them, because it's like on two different levels. I have like the lower level of information from Arabic, and they have like the higher, they're better at speaking it and understanding.
So you've kind of got the lingo, you've got the slang version, maybe sort of the bastardized version of Arabic, and they've got the official, beautiful, I was an Arabic major in college Arabic, that type of thing. Or there's also regional dialects. A lot of countries have regional dialects where it's like, okay, I know Germany's like, I spent time in Germany when I was in high school, and I know that Germany's like that. Everyone speaks German, but boy, I tell you, there are certain regions of Germany where you go to and supposedly you're speaking the same language, and it's like, huh? In the United States, we have some variants of that. I mean, some of us have a really difficult time kind of understanding people if we go down south, and there's these thick southern accents. Other people occasionally struggle to understand me because I spent a lot of time in the Northeast. So in New York, and we tend to, we talk in kind of like a machine gun cadence, so very fast, very hard. Sometimes it's hard to, so there are simple regional differences like that.
Yeah, my dad is from Jordan, and then there's like, my stepmom is from Palestine. So when I go to visit with my family in Jordan, they make fun of me because I grew up learning the Palestinian dialect of Arabic, and it's just, it's awkward.
So there we go. So those kinds of, now, let's take that experience, and how does that help you understand who you are and what the challenge is that you might be faced with as a physician?
I would say it would probably put me, I can say that I can relate to somebody who's being put in an environment where they don't really understand what's going on, and then I can feel like I can relate to that person because of my experience with this. You speak the weird dialect kind of thing.
Right. Good. Okay, so that's how we can sort of bring our experiences in, however they might be. So that particular experience, I have to say, maybe before right now, may not have been something that you thought was really kind of relevant to you and the way you think about the profession and the kinds of awareness that you think are going to make you a little bit more prepared to be an effective healthcare provider. Right? So a lot of times it's really just about what we're aware of. So let me ask you something. Anyone in the group, has anyone ever coached anything? Any coaches? Manny, what'd you coach?
I was a tennis coach during summer camp.
Okay, and who did you coach?
Kids that were in wheelchairs.
That were what?
Elementary school children.
Elementary school children. Had they ever picked up a tennis racket before? Okay, so what did you have to do to teach a third grader how to play tennis?
I had to show them the right way to hold a tennis racket.
Okay. Now, interestingly, you said specifically that you showed them. Did I hear that, or did you tell them?
I showed them.
All right, so now let's think about the difference between that. All right, so when we talk about communicating information, we have a variety of mechanisms that we can utilize to do that. All right? In some cases, we sometimes have to show people rather than tell them. Does a doctor ever have to do that? Anyone think of an example right off the bat?
Physical therapy.
Physical therapy? I'm a pediatrician, all right? So let me just cut to the example that I'm thinking of immediately. Medications for children tend to be liquid. All right, and so sometimes when I don't have the luxury of saying, take a pill. Sometimes I have to say to parents, I need you to give your child 1.5 mLs of that medication 3 times a day. So, how effective is that communication? Where's the obstacle?
I don't know how much that is.
Okay, like let's start with what the devil's an ml. All right, now you guys all in metric, right? We learned that, right? Because it was really important that we learn it, right? And how often do we use it outside of a chemistry lab? How much do you weigh?
I'm not sure, but maybe 120.
Okay, so not metric. Okay, right? That was the big thing, right? That was everything was related. If we turn it all into metric, everything is related. And clearly, if anyone knows their weight in kilograms, please share it or not. But I would venture that most of you don't think about your weight in kilograms. In the hospital, we do. So, along that way, that metric system, that's what we talk about when we're talking about dispensing medication. So how do I begin to convey the concept of 1.5 mLs to a mom?
Change it to her understanding, like,
Which is what?
like teaspoons, tablespoons.
Okay, how many mLs in a teaspoon? Come on, you guys, that's part of the conversion thing. You learned that in 6th grade, right? Come on, who remembers? A room of overachievers, and you can't tell me how many mLs is in a teaspoon.
I have kids, but I don't use teaspoon to give my kids medicine. But instead of that, I use the syringes. Yeah, so it shows how many.
Okay, so how many mLs in a teaspoon?
Well,
Can we show them?
You guys, it's so easy. 5.
5.
Oh.
Okay, how many teaspoons in a tablespoon?
3.
You guys, we gotta work on this, all right? We gotta develop a little fluency in this. There's 3 teaspoons in 1 tablespoon. All right, so how many mLs in a tablespoon? That's multiplication. Come on. 50. All right, yeah, please help me out. Now I'm getting worried, you know? I was like, okay, I wasn't sure how nervous to be, but when I can't get 3 times 5 out of you guys, I'm really scared, all right? I know you all know that. So 15 mLs in a tablespoon. Now, so one of the things is, so I can say, okay, 1.5 mLs, but 1.5 mLs is basically not quite a third of a teaspoon. All right, now, in your measuring spoons at home, do you have a measuring spoon that's 1/3 of a teaspoon? No, right? So we have a quarter, we have a half, and we have a teaspoon, and we have a tablespoon. That's usually the 4 spoons that are in a measuring spoon set, right? So none of those is going to help us with 1.5 ml. So how do we measure 1.5 mLs? You just told me.
Yeah.
We use a syringe, okay? Or if you also go to Walgreens, they have little cylinders that have a little kind of spout at the end, and they have little hash marks. So it's like a graduated cylinder. So you can measure up 1.5 mLs on that cylinder and administer that. Now, I can tell you that. All right? I can say to you as a mom, all right, so now you have to go and you're gonna get a 3 cc syringe and you're gonna pull up the plunger on the syringe to the 1.5 mark, and that's what you're gonna give your child. Right? I can tell you that. But if you've never held a 3 cc syringe before, if you have no visual reference at all, then even that direction, even though it's quite clear and quite concise, is not effectively communicating what I need you to do. And that's when I take the syringe and I show them. Okay? So this is the kind of thing. So when you've had that experience, when you've had the experience or the responsibility of conveying information to someone, and you've been challenged to do that, either because the people that you're conveying information to are very young, you're talking about a skill that they have absolutely no background with, and you're trying to help them acquire that skill. If you are, trying to, so that's one aspect of it. Okay, so that's a very valuable experience when we talk about becoming a physician. That experience of teaching people a new skill and understanding that sometimes in order to communicate that, we have to think a little bit outside the box. We have to think about the words we use. Sometimes modifying the words is going to be enough, but sometimes modifying the words is not going to be enough, and then we literally have to show them. Okay? So we're going to actually show them how to hold the tennis racket. Right? A lot of times on my physical exams, when I'm examining a small child, I ask them to walk on their tiptoes. And sometimes a child looks at me like going, seriously? Like, what does that even mean? And why are you, as a doctor, asking me to do that? And so then, what I invariably find myself doing is walking around an exam room on my tiptoes so that we all understand exactly what I want to see them do. The flip side of that is I also ask them to walk on their heels with their toes up in the air. That gets a little more challenging. Tippy toe walking, we get that. But when someone says walk on your heels with your toes up in the air, that doesn't mean so much. Or we don't have that sort of immediate point of reference. So that becomes walking like a duck. Okay? And then if walking like a duck isn't good enough, I usually tell them walk like a duck as I'm walking around the room with my heels on the ground and my toes up in the air, walking like a duck. All right? So that's communication. So when you think about the things that you've done in your life, tell me about times and experience that you've had where effective communication has been a challenge.
I taught ballet in high school.
Okay.
Telling a 5-year-old to turn out and point your foot is almost impossible. You have to show them.
Okay, so you physically have to move their feet.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's also, sometimes it's literally more than showing them. In other words, you could stand and turn your feet out and show them what it looks like, but now we've gone to the next step. And sometimes it's physically taking their hand or taking their foot and putting it in the position that you want it in. And that's something, a lot of times when we talk about physical therapy, that's sometimes something that many physical therapists will do. They'll sit there and say, okay, I need you to do this, and you're like, huh? And you try, and you think you got it, and they're like, no, no, no. And all of a sudden, they adjust your knee this much, and you have an entirely different sensation. But interestingly, we have a sensation. That's one way we learn. It's like, okay, in order to do this correctly, I need to repeat that sensation. If I don't feel exactly that, I know I'm not doing it correctly. That's also something that we can now verbally communicate to patients. Do you see what I mean? Does that feel different? Yes. That's the feeling you need to have, and when you feel that, then you know you're doing it correctly. Okay? Other examples? Difficult? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a daughter, and every time I try to explain the math problem to her, sometimes she got tired and she doesn't want to listen. So it's really hard to communicate with each other when she just.
So how do you overcome that problem? Do you just stop?
Well, I try to take a moment, and whenever she's ready, we try to talk again. But at the time, it's not really effective to continue the talking.
Other possible solutions?
Well, sometimes she goes to daddy to ask.
It's always good. So those of us that have that option, it's always a good option, right? Go to daddy, It's like, usually it's the other way around though, I think, right? Usually it's go to mom. Okay. Other thoughts?
One time I taught a girl who was primarily Spanish speaking. I was trying to teach her the concept of putting things in alphabetical order. That was very difficult.
Why?
Because I only know conversational Spanish and she knows very little English. And I think putting things in alphabetical order if you're very young can be confusing just in and of itself. So I had to just speak mainly in English, but then just use certain Spanish words that I knew and just try to show her.
And how did you personally find that experience?
It was challenging, but I know how to do it now. I think it was successful.
Okay, so the thing that you need to do though is don't jump to the last stage, all right? So what we need to understand is, what was that like for you as an individual? What was that process like? Initially, I can imagine it might be frustrating. Okay? Initially, I can imagine that you could feel sort of helpless, inept, which is not anything that any of us like to experience. I feel totally incompetent. I feel unable to do this. And then we experiment, we learn, we understand that yada yada with some effort by doing things that are not exactly. Is there a book written anywhere, Manny, that tells us how to explain to a non-English speaking child how to put things in alphabetical order if we have 6 words of Spanish? Does that book exist in like the Spanish language curriculum? So now we have to get a little inventive, right? We sort of like do that one on the fly. And a lot of times, how did you know you were successful?
Because the teacher told me a week later that she had gotten a 98 on her English test.
Okay, so you got feedback a week later. Did you get any feedback earlier than that?
No.
No. So there was no evidence from the child that you were effectively conveying that idea to her?
Yes, I had brought like worksheets with problems where you have to put certain words in alphabetical order, and so I did a few with her, and then she started doing them by herself.
Okay, so I want to make this very, very intentional. I need you to understand the parts of the process. All right, you got feedback almost immediately. All right, and it's the same thing that happens when I'm a physician. If I'm giving someone directions on how to administer medication, the equivalent of that is 2 weeks later when I see the child in follow-up, if the infection's gone, then I get the feedback, right? Oh, good, mom gave the medication correctly. I don't need to wait that long, and I won't wait that long to get that feedback. I need more immediate feedback. Did you understand that? Here's a syringe. Can you show me? Do you get that? Pull it down for me. There are lots of ways that we get immediate feedback to confirm to ourselves that we've done a good job of conveying that idea. Okay? How did you feel when she showed you that she could put the words in alphabetical order?
I felt good, and I felt proud of her and myself that I was able to teach her.
And how did she feel?
imagine she felt really good.
What makes you think that?
Just because she was able to do it.
Okay. Any facial expressions? How do you know? In other words, guys, when we think about these experiences, I want you to think about the whole experience. I want you, we've got eyes, we've got ears, we've got noses. We get lots and lots of sensory input. That's what I want you to reflect on. When I'm saying reflection, those are the kinds of very, very basic things I want you to be thinking about. Understand there's so much data that comes into you. Imagine how that little girl felt. She's sitting there going, this strange black lady is trying to teach me something and I have no idea. And then she's like, oh wait, sort of, I get it, maybe. Oh, she speaks funny Spanish. I'm not really, can you imagine the thoughts that are going through that little kid's head? And then all of a sudden she's like, oh wait. And then she tries this and she gets, and then suddenly, and you go, yes. And all of a sudden, she's mastered a task and she gets tremendous positive feedback from you. And imagine how that makes her feel. Okay? How did you guys feel when you mastered a task like that and got positive feedback like that? Did any of you ever have that experience where you mastered a task and somebody said, oh my God, that's it? And you went, yeah, I did it. Did any of you ever have that experience? If anyone is shaking their head no, I feel sorry for you, and A, you're lying. Because in order to get where you've gotten to today, every single one of you has had numerous experiences like that. Okay? All of us have tremendous, tremendous raw material. All right? There are so many life experiences that we each have had. Our life experiences are totally unique to us. So I could sit here and I could go around and ask each one of you to share an experience, and it will be totally different than the person that came before you and the person that's going to come after you. All right? And that is the great part about this, is that you have this body of experience which is totally unique. Okay, and incredibly important and incredibly valuable, and really has gone a long way to preparing all of you to be health professionals. You need to understand how those experiences relate to being a health professional. Does this make a little bit of sense? Okay, so now, let's try something else, all right? So we have the idea of communication. So we've talked about the different things that we've had. So guys, let me ask you something. Have any of you, so what else besides communication, anything else that you'd like to think of? When you for those of you that have shadowed, what else have you been aware of as you've walked into a medical environment? You know, you've walked in, the doctor's taking care of patients. Is the doctor there by himself? Really? Who else is there?
You and the patient?
Anybody else in the area, the general area?
Nurses, techs.
Nurses, techs, medical assistants. You know, sometimes there's a dietitian, sometimes there's a pharmacist, all right? So I'm not sure we mentioned this before. If we didn't, one of the things that we have to recognize is that medicine is a team sport, okay? None of us provides care for an individual without the help of lots of other people. That's why you got, in the session before that, we're hearing about a variety of professions in the healthcare fields. And everybody makes a very, very significant contribution to an individual's health. So recognizing that we don't provide this kind of help alone, being cognizant of that and being respectful of the contributions that other people make is really, really important part of being an effective physician. So now, have any of you ever had any experience where you've been part of a team? Jake?
Well, I used to work in a doctor's office, and I was like the front office with medical records, so we'd always have to...
Oh, so your team was actually a medical team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so give me a non-medical example.
I was on a football team. I was on a jiu-jitsu team.
Okay.
It was mostly like helping each other like learn and move or something like that, just so we could like succeed in like a fight or something, or like pointing out what we did wrong.
Okay. So there's athletic teams. Any other examples of teamwork?
I used to be a manager for Sunglass Hut.
Of
and-
what?
For Sunglass Hut.
Oh yeah. Oh.
So a retail team.
Oh, I so love that experience. Okay, so tell me about that.
Okay, so there was per store a team usually of maybe up to 5 people.
Uh-huh.
And it was really important that every person contribute because otherwise you weren't going to make sales plan.
Okay. So what kind of contributions were you expecting from team members?
Keeping the store clean, being educated on the sunglasses, being able to communicate that information to customers, being able to fix sunglasses for people, communicating what was going on to other team members.
Okay. And you were the head of that? Okay, so how did you assess whether or not the team was effective?
Well, there were some concrete ways to tell, like, sales numbers was a good way to tell, and that's usually what upper management was looking for.
Uh-huh.
But also just having discussions with the team members and then observing what kind of condition the store was in, after they worked, feedback from customers also.
Ooh, I so love this. And so did you ever have, I can't imagine this would happen because I'm sure you were a superb team leader, but did you ever have any experience with your team functioning less than optimally?
Yes.
Really? So, give me an example of that. When did the team not work right?
Well, sometimes there were sales associates who weren't really into being there, or they had gotten burnt out, and they weren't really doing their job anymore.
Okay. And how did that how did you identify those people? How did you know that?
Well, it usually showed in their work.
Okay.
And
in
also,
what way? In what way?
Well, they wouldn't do all of the things they were supposed to do, or when I was, for example, telling them about a new product, say, they wouldn't seem interested.
Uh-huh.
Or they would leave
that whole
the
engaged
store
thing that,
when we
that I
were there.
mentioned before. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So they weren't engaged. I'm sorry, I interrupted. What
Oh
else?
no, that's okay. Or they would leave the store because it was a single coverage environment. So if I wasn't there to watch them, I would get feedback from nearby employees who would tell me that they would just leave for long periods at a time. That was the worst.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so anyone else have any retail experience? Okay, guys, so this is exactly, so when someone says, what do you recognize are important parts of the healthcare profession? First of all, one of those things that you've observed, right? Because you've gone to Shadow and you've been very attentive as you've walked in the door and you're taking it all in, and you've passed the guy at the front desk, and you've seen the medical assistant who's weighing the kid and taking vitals, and you've seen a nurse sitting in the back who's giving injections and charting, what have you. So all of a sudden you're going, wow, there's a lot of action here, and I'm just here to see that guy. But boy, it's clear that there's a lot more than that guy working in this environment. So there's a team here. Right? So all of a sudden, now you can begin to talk about, in order to give really effective healthcare, you have to be a really good team player. All right? And then we're saying, wow, talk about that. Are you a good team player? Maria, you've been on a team. Are you a good team player?
Yes.
Really? Tell me about an experience. How do you know that you're a good team player?
So I can also speak to like having retail experience and.
But wait, what I want to be clear about is you need to hear the question. So in other words, you don't need to speak to something that someone else has already spoken to. What I want you to think about is in all the experiences that you've had where you've had to function as part of a team, what evidence, what do you think is the most striking example that points up how effective you were as a team member?
I'd say just like my own personal character, being able to contribute.
That's not an example. That's a testimonial of you about you. That doesn't count. Okay, so this is what I need you to understand. I need you to sort of understand that now we're giving a very specific example. I want to hear a story that comes from your life about the time that you were a member of a team where suddenly, aha, it occurred to you that you really can function incredibly effectively as part of a team. That creating a team or being a part of a team, how do we measure that? Sometimes we measure it by team outcome. Was your team charged with producing a product of some kind? If you guys were successful in doing that, then that's indirect evidence that you had a really well-functioning team. Does that make sense? All right, so what I want to do, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, sorry about that. I know it's a little, but anyway, but what I want you to understand, this isn't about general stuff. This isn't about highfalutin, no, my character, this, that, but, you know, I mean, I know that. I know that you're an upstanding young woman. I know that you've got great character, but you know what? I can tell you I'm a really nice guy, too. I can tell you that. But you know, if I sit there and you're asking me, so are you a nice guy? And I'm going, yeah, I'm a really nice guy. That's like, great. You have my word for it. It's like, seriously? That's it? You're going to take it on my word? Don't. Okay, so don't ever. No, so in other words, it's like, wait, so let's see, you know, hey, he says he's a nice guy. Maybe I should check with someone else, you know? Or tell me about a time that you were a nice guy. How do you think, when you think of yourself being a nice guy, what does that mean to you? Tell me a time that you thought, yeah, I'm really a nice guy, and why are you a nice guy? Why, you know, what's in it for you being a nice guy? Okay, so when we talk about these things, these are almost, on one hand, they're very, very concrete. On the other hand, they're intangibles. All right, so the thing that I need you to understand is that that's how we're going to break down. In other words, when we look at someone, when we look at the kind of work that they're doing, when we look at the skills that they have, when we see bad situations and we see someone addressing a bad situation, the first thing we have to do is define what is a bad situation. Sometimes a bad situation is a patient getting really angry and sort of really being really in your face and yelling at you. And that happens to all of us, and sometimes you may witness that as a shadowing student. It's like, oh my gosh, but the interaction can't end there. So what happens when a patient, first of all, what prompted the patient to yell at the healthcare provider? Something prompted that. Okay, so as you are looking at the situation, what was that? What actually prompted that? And then, what was the healthcare provider's response to that? Did he just say, oh, wow, I don't like you either, and walk out and leave the person? Which is, believe it or not, an urge that you certainly will experience. It's like, I don't need this, I'm gonna leave. And you can't, all right? Because your job is to sit there and take, even if that person is really angry and yelling at you, your job is to sit there and take care of them. So how is that possible? How do you move from having someone yelling at you to sort of moving beyond to a point where you can say, okay, let's do what we're here for, which is to provide healthcare for you. What skills are involved with that? Now we have to diffuse, as the provider, I have to diffuse that anger. So, have any of you been confronted? Have any of you ever had that experience where someone's been really, really angry at you, and it's really affected sort of a process, something that has to get done?
I had kind of one situation when I was shadowing the physician, and the patient was yelling at her because patient wanted to have like, let's just say drugs, give me some drugs. But physician kind of turned from the other side. She started talking to her like, and also she said that she wanna eat, and the physician was like, for you to be able to eat, not that she was yelling, I need first for you to try to help me to stay calm, that way I can see your results and the reason why you came here, and then you're gonna have your food, and also she was restraints, and we're gonna remove your restraints. I need you to be able to stay calm for at least 10 minutes.
Okay.
And like, I like it how patient was like really yelling at her, and she was calm and tried to take it from the other side, explain to the patient what important for the patient, and that way she gonna do her job. Like,
Okay.
you know.
So that the ability, that's a great story, and it's a great experience to have. You know, a lot of times you go, oh yeah, I shadowed this guy, and he's such a great doctor, and this and that, blah, blah. You know, and it's like these, and all these shadowing hours turn into like total vanilla. You know, it's like, okay, there was nothing in there, that's it. You know, everything was just hunky-dory all the time, and that's what you take away. And if that's your impression of medicine, that's a very, very false impression. Okay, and that's the other thing that we're listening for. When people ask you, what's your insight? What do you understand about the profession? If you say, oh, this is great, and it's always satisfying, and it's always, it's wonderful, and everyone loves you, and you love everybody, and all that, it's like, okay, I don't know who you were shadowing, but it wasn't on this planet. Okay, it's simply that as a reality does not exist here. And so when we talk about this, when we talk about that, what people want to hear is exactly this, sort of this spectrum of experiences, knowing and understanding that you can have really awful experiences and still you need to be able to function. So what's your experience with that? And now, Oksana, the next question that I would ask you is, do you think you could do that?
I'm sure it's possible.
Do you know that you can do that?
Since I saw that situation, now I do.
Now I want you to know. Give me an example. So this is the thing. Do you have this skill? Give me an example from all of the experiences that you've had in your life that has shown to you that you have that ability. You have the ability to diffuse anger and to bring it down a notch and continue on and have a productive discussion. Jade, ever have an angry customer? No.
Especially
No one ever. Man, retail never has angry customers, right? It's like doctors never have angry patients. People that sell sunglasses never see an angry customer. People that sell pizza never see an angry customer. People that sell Chick-fil-A never see an angry customer. Okay? So, tell me the story of an angry customer.
So, I once had a customer who was really mad about our return policy. They tried to return a pair of damaged sunglasses, which we did not take back, damaged sunglasses. And of course, as the manager, I was one responsible, so I got yelled at. And that can be difficult for somebody yelling at you. It can be tempting to yell back, but that's not at all productive. So,
because what's your other motivation as a manager, right? So retail is, one of the principles of retail, if I'm not mistaken, is you like the idea that people are going to come back.
yes.
Right? We like return visitors. We like people that when they think, oh, I need a new pair of sunglasses, they're going to go back to the same place that they bought their last pair of sunglasses. So all of a sudden, you really do have to kind of resist the urge to say, listen, Jack, beat it, I never want to see your face again. Because that guy, over the course of his life, may buy 50 pairs of sunglasses, and now he's going to buy it from somebody other than your Sunglass Hut place. So let's understand what our responsibilities are. It's like, okay, we have the situation, we have an angry customer, but we don't want that customer to be angry. We want that customer to sort of, in spite of this unfortunate situation, walk away with a warm, fuzzy feeling about Sunglass Hut, so that when they do need their next pair of sunglasses, they come back. So, were you able to accomplish that? The warm, fuzzy feeling part?
I was definitely able to make it better.
Okay.
So I let them finish yelling at me, and then I apologized and told them, that I understood that it was frustrating, and then I told them what I was able to do for them. So even though we weren't able to return it, we were able to, use a different policy that the company had where I could replace it for them for half price, that kind of thing. And so at least that was something, and they were pretty happy with that.
I love that. So now we have an example from a sales experience at Sunglass Hut that is directly related and evidence of a skill that can be really, really important to someone who's trying to provide healthcare. Okay? So that's the thing, guys. So what I want you to do when you think about your experiences, I want you, and when we said, remember when I said, keep your log, reflect, pick a moment, write down, think about what that moment means. This is a great example of a moment that you can think about that you had not in a hospital, not doing volunteer work, not like nursing the poor, whatever. You weren't doing anything noble. Well, I mean, selling sunglasses isn't ignoble, but, it wasn't like grand and glorious. It was a job. You needed to make your bills. You had to make money. That's something we all have to do. So you had to be there. But interestingly, on this day, you had that customer that was in your face. And to sit down and think about that situation, what created that tension? And I was able to diffuse that. That's incredible. But a lot of times, it's like, we don't really think about it. It's like, oh yeah, that's what everybody does. It's an effective manager at Sunglass Hut. And maybe it is. But being an effective manager at Sunglass Hut is going to help prepare you to be an effective healthcare provider. So those are the things. That's the hard part, but that's how I want you to think about experiences, all right? Every single experience that you have potentially can relate to you preparing for a career in the health professions. The challenge is to figure out the relation, all right? It's not easy, but it gets easier with practice. And that's the other reason that I would encourage you all to, as much as possible, take the 5 minutes and do some reflection. Figure out what that experience was like, what it felt like to you, what your understanding of the situation was, what you found yourself able to do to change it, and then say, how is this possibly relevant? If I'm thinking of a career in medicine, I hated that experience. I would love to not ever have that experience again. In medicine, you're going to have lots of experiences like that. So then it's really important to know you can handle those experiences, okay? And then to be able to talk about that is really important. And a lot of times, people appreciate the fact that you have those kinds of insights, that you understand that everything about your life up to this point in time, when you were sitting across from the big interviewer in the big interview, everything in your life has been preparing you for this moment where you can tell them why you are absolutely prepared for a career in the health professions. From a personal perspective, academically, you're going to learn that. That's what the school part's about. But personally, I know what my strengths are, I know what my skills are, I understand what it needs to be a physician, and I know that I have some of those skills, and I can prove that to you. I can give you examples from my experience that will show you that I have those abilities. Okay? Stunned silence. Oh my God. All right, so one of the things I want to be clear, guys, it's not easy. It really isn't easy. But the thing about it is so I have to tell you right now, this kind of talk, having the opportunity to tell you these things, I find personally very satisfying. And the reason for that is I would like to see every one of you achieve that dream. Whatever your dream is in the health professions, I would like to see you achieve that. And I think that if you don't understand the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about, the kinds of things that you can share with people about yourself, then you're minimizing your chances of being successful. All right? We're going to talk about this our last session one more time, creating a new, unique application. But one of the things that you're going to hear today, and you're going to hear a lot more during our last session, is that your life experiences, you need to understand how relevant they are to a career in the health professions. All right? It's not about the research that you did. It's not about the volunteer work that you did in the hospital. It's everything. Every single part of your life is relevant to to being prepared as an individual for a career in the health professions. You need to take the time to figure out how. Okay? Questions?
So we get these experiences through journaling and logging. And
You don't get the
Or,
experiences.
I mean, you
get
document
the
them.
experiences by going out and doing stuff, by going to work, by going to class. Remember, a lot of you have been part of a team as far as class projects. Have any of you in classes had to work as part of a team? I mean, yeah, almost everybody's had to work as part of a team in classes. And so you guys all have very firsthand knowledge on what makes an effective team and what makes an ineffective team. How did the team break down? If you were less than successful, what caused that problem? All right? Recognizing those kinds of shortcomings, you can generalize that up. What do you see in the practice of medicine? What would you do to sort of improve your practice? What do you see as potential problems? And how do you address those problems? You can start by the bad experience you had in your team experience in your engineering class or in your public speaking class. Say, what were the problems? And then how do you fix them? All right? So it's not grand things. It's not how do you fix world poverty or how do you correct the mortality rate from whatever. It's not grand questions. It's little stuff. And if we think about it practically, then it's like it's everything about our lives is related to medicine. Okay? Who we're going to vote for in November is related to medicine. That's a whole other thing, and I won't go there, but don't kid yourself. Healthcare is incredibly, incredibly political. All right? So if you think that politics aren't interesting, you better get interested in politics. Because if you're going to be involved in the delivery of healthcare, you are entering an incredibly politicized system. Okay, I think that's it. All right, anyone have any questions? I'll be happy to answer.
if anyone's new and this is your first